Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to Storytime with Chris James. I will try to pick up right where I left off last time. What with so few students being there, Mrs. Sandtiger was able to focus her full attention on Pam. No, don't mix those two together. You'll create a hyperthermic solution which will melt right through the table. Pam was shocked to learn cooking was kind of like chemistry class. They were using ingredients that just might lead to the end of the world. Well, at least Pam's a part of it. How come you have dangerous chemicals in home ec class? Pam wasn't trying to be a smarty. She was trying to get smarter. I share the room with Mr. Angel, and he teaches chemistry. Unfortunately, some of his teaching aids look exactly like my cooking ingredients. So this isn't really flour? No, it's ammonium nitrate. Miss Sandtiger closed the bag and set it back under the counter. What's ammonium nitrate? Pam looked at the contents of her cake mix. Miss Sandtiger leaned in real close and whispered in her ear. You're making a bomb. Oh, Pam had no idea baking could be so dangerous. She managed to survive math class and gym without destroying anything or starting any fires or creating any more explosives. Pam noticed several of her classmates that had been there earlier today were now amongst the missing. They must have bailed during lunch. Pam literally ran from the track straight to her locker and then out the door and over to her truck. There it sat, all shiny and clean. Pam would have wondered about this, except she was now too focused on getting to the office and finding out what was going on. She worked the clutch and the gear shift without a thought. The drive over was way too slow. Pam wanted to speed, but her inner voice kept an eye on her driving. Watch it, you'll get a ticket, and then you'll have to explain it to your dad. I would just want to get to the office and find out what happened to Hortense. So watch what you're doing, or you'll wind up in the hospital or the morgue. Oh, okay. I'm just worried. Of all of her inner voices, this one was the most annoying. Pam fought her urges and drove like a calm, careful schoolgirl, which she was but didn't feel like. The sweat from her gym class had mostly dried by the time she pulled into the dirt yard and parked. Pam ran past the reception desk and straight up the stairs. The second floor landing came and went. When the third floor appeared, Pam took in the change that had taken place since her visit yesterday. All the papers were now stacked neatly along one wall. Some piles were only inches, while others were as tall as her. Sharma gave her a big smile. Have you seen Hortense today? Pam had to place her hands on her knees and try to catch her breath. No, not today, but we found Hans Hansenson's file on the missing kids. Sharma held out a file folder, stuffed full of papers in several different colors. Pam held up one finger and moved to the door to room 3E. She knocked once and opened the door. The room was empty. Well, empty of people. What just happened? How come my volume went down again? Empty of people. There was the usual, the desk covered with snow globes and books stacked up on the corners. The table in the corner had a set of bagpipes laying on it. Pam didn't know Hortense was into music. The walls were covered with mirrors. Pam wondered if the bagpipes had been there yesterday when she'd looked. Pam looked around the room for any indication that Hortense had left by any means other than the door. There was a chair sitting in front of a particularly large mirror. Pam looked at the chair and then the mirror. She couldn't tell if this was normal or if something odd had become of Hortense. Yesterday, did you guys ever hear or see anything odd going on in here? Sharma was looking around the room as well. No, we were making a bit of noise yesterday ourselves. She looked at Dan, who was standing in the door. We didn't notice anything. Dan just shook his head. Pam was now torn between her friends. Sharma had found something important, and Pam wanted to show her appreciation, but she was vexed by the location of Hortense not being known to anyone. It wasn't as if people working here didn't wander all the time, but something just felt wrong. So what did you guys find? Pam tried to show all of her attention to the ghosts. We found a file. Well, it was several files, but we combined them into one. It says there were about 16 confirmed kids missing, but an additional 9 that may have something to do with the others. Sharma thumbed through the file. Naomi Cuthbert did indeed vanish from a room filled with the detectives. None of them were willing to say what it was they saw, but rumor has it a large green hand reached up from her scrying bowl and drug her into it. Sharma pulled a photograph from the file. Here's a picture. The picture was of a table with a bowl set in the middle. The water was splashed all around the place. A chair was laying on the floor after the occupant had been violently snatched from their seat. A nice picture. Pam wondered if there was anything to be seen that she couldn't see. What's that on the corner of the table? Half-eaten donut? Dan had already looked close at the picture. Did Hans have any idea as to where all the missing kids were? Yes, he had some kind of thoughts on the subject. Sharma looked at Dan, who quickly moved back into the hall. Hans thought the missing kids might have run away and joined the French Foreign Legion, but that was just one idea. He also looked into them having been abducted by aliens. Sharma flipped through some more pages, and he thought maybe they had all vanished into the Bermuda Triangle. Wow! Pam was impressed by this last thought. But we're nowhere near the Bermuda Triangle. Yeah, so he tried to invent a new triangle of vanishings. Sharma pulled a page out and held it up so Pam could see. The sheet was 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, and it showed a map with the kind of triangle shape outline covering the entire city as well as parts of the county. Pam noticed there had been several triangle shapes that were partially erased. You can see black X's showing the locations of the last known locations of the missing. Sharma pointed out the few marks. There are only 10 because most people disappeared without anybody knowing where they were. Most of the X's are around the school. This made Pam feel a whole lot uncomfortable. And look, the school is the exact center of the triangle. We should do an investigation in and around the school. Pam went to gather the staff for a meeting. They met in the coffee shop. Seeing as it's Friday, nobody except the cleaning staff will be at the school. I think we can get permission if we ask Mr. Hammerhead. Pam got busy mixing all the additives into her coffee. Madam Dingus said, "Let me make a call. I'll be right back." She slipped out to Hildy's desk. While everybody was busy not doing anything, Pam got a rag from under the bar and dusted Wanda Murkowski off. There were some spider webs running from her arm to the countertop. Eddie brought over a fresh cup of espresso and set it near her right hand. "Do you think maybe we should—" No. We tried waking her up. There's no telling what might happen." Eddie looked over at Wanda to see if there was anything out of place. "We got a cat trying to interfere with the show. I get enough of that as it is." Madam Dingus came walking in as if just having won the Psychic of the Year award. "We can investigate the school tomorrow. Bobby, Mr. Hammerhead, said he'd contact the cleaning staff and tell them to let us in." She looked at Pam, who was staring at her as if she just grew antlers. "What? We may have dated once or twice, back when we were young. Well, younger, that is." Plans were made to meet up tomorrow at the school. Chapter 7. Weekend. Sarah had spent the night politicking. She'd started by offering to do Pam's homework for a week. Then she tried promising to clean the room she shared with Pam, including doing their laundry. "Sarah, if you really want to come with me, just ask." Pam felt as if the tween was more of a sister than a roommate. Miss Bellum was glad her youngest was so interested in going to high school. Sandy had just the opposite thought. Why would anybody want to go to school on a Saturday? The drive to school felt so different. Pam parked in the usual spot and pulled a big black plastic case from the back seat. It contained some of the electronic gear they would use to search the building. Sarah grabbed a small bag with her ghost hunting gear in it. The side door was unlocked, so Pam entered and found the rest of the gang all ready to go. The janitor just gave Pam a wary look, as if to say, "Don't you see enough of this place already?" Barbara, what was her last name again? See the Bag Company or the Bag Here We Go Again or the Bag Go Squatching for answers. She was decked out in her brand new ghost hunting vest. It had so many pockets, she forgot what she'd put in them or where the items were. Bill had come along hoping to find the key piece of evidence that would elevate him to a position of respect and veneration amongst the Bag staff. He didn't want to admit it, but he was really trying to elevate himself in his own eyes. He pulled at the collar of his shirt as if being strangled. Madam Dingus had come along since she was the one who arranged for the search. She planned to stay just long enough to be seen searching, and then she wanted to slip away. She had things to do today that didn't involve looking for missing teens with antisocial behavior problems. George Zimbalinski came doddering over, sat down at one of the tables in the cafeteria, and fell asleep. This was to be expected, since he fell asleep just about everywhere. Pam was surprised when she saw Bruce Wallace come sauntering along, his cane doing its best to keep him upright. "Hope you don't mind me tagging along. I'm a bit rusty, but I'll do my best." He tried to twirl his cane, but wound up dropping it instead. And last but not least, Manuel Vargas was there. His description at the Bag office said, "Just plain psychic stuff," which pretty much covered it all. "Okay, you guys, try working all along the hallway, and we'll see what's what here in this end." Pam handed out assignments as if she were in charge. Being related to the owner of the building used as their office, Pam was more like the chief suggestions officer. I'll swing back by in a few minutes and check on George." They broke into 2 groups of 4 and headed into the great unknown. Maybe that's the wrong way of putting it. Pam knew the building as well as any student in her 4th year. Most of the BAG members had attended some schooling here over the years. So, they headed to their sections of search. George was assigned to Pam's group, so there were only 3 awake and moving members in her group. Sarah had a camera in one hand and a voice recorder and a multimeter in the other. She had to keep shuffling things around so she wouldn't drop anything. She would stop every so many steps and ask a question of whichever spirit might be lurking about the darkness of the well-lit hallway. "Is there anyone here that wants to talk to me?" And, "Can you tell me your name?" Followed by, "Would you make a noise?" And once in a while, "Say something, darn it." Too many cats. Yes, I know my t-shirt says I love cats, but it's too many when they start climbing all over my equipment. Sarah didn't provoke the ghosts. If they want to speak, they will. And if they don't, they might just give you a wedgie instead. Now who is destroying the office? I must have ghosts. No, I have cats. Ghost cats. "Sarah, don't provoke the ghosts. If they want to speak, they will, and if they don't, you just might get a wedgie instead." Oh, a ghost wedgie. How gross. Mr. Wallace managed to stay close to the 2 girls. He stopped on occasion, leaning his cane against anything handy, and touched a wall or felt along a doorway. Once or twice he thought he might have something, but on closer examination he ruled out each item. Barbara's group, well, it wasn't so much her group. It could be called Manuel's group or Madame Dingus's group. Bill was just too new to be assigned a group yet. Okay, Manuel's group, but he wasn't in charge. He was just a member like the others. How about the group that consisted of? Nah, that's too many words. The other group worked along both sides of the hallway as if sneaking up on some unknown adversary. Barbara held a thermal camera up in front of her face and looked for anything unseen to the naked eye. Bill walked along just behind, trying to pick up on anything odd that jumped unbidden into his mind. If he knew what he was looking for, he would have had a better chance of seeing it. Kind of like getting a loan at the bank. They only loan you money if you already have some. Manuel was on the opposite wall. He would stop and close his eyes and then try to see using his 3rd eye. Or was it his 4th? Something like that. It's a psychic thing. He took a great big breath to see if there was any smells to be had. Madame Dingus felt she didn't need to follow in anyone's footsteps, so she just kind of wandered about, staying well behind the group. But close enough in case a monster or a demon attacked, she could get into the safety in the numbers. She had brought her crystal ball as well as her cards, but didn't feel like dragging them out of her purse. She had left her purple turban in her car, not wanting to get it mussed up in the nasty school full of kids' cooties. Manuel was walking along the hallway when something drew his attention towards the wall. He turned left and then right, weaving back and forth until his hand came to rest on a wall locker. There's something here, something odd. He ran his hand up and down the edges. Whoever uses this locker has some weird things hidden inside. He looked around as if worried the owner of the metal cabinet might come walking along at any minute. Barbara looked at the lock holding the door shut. "Give me a second." She felt the dial, turned it back and forth a few times. She gave the lock a tug, and then she got down to business. The dial went one way, slow but steady. When Barbara felt the pin catch, she stopped and spun the dial in the opposite direction. Then she stopped once more, turned back again. She had learned how to pick a lock in the Girl Scouts, amongst other things. The owner of this lock must be a real cheapskate. This thing could be opened by a 3-year-old. The lock popped open. The door swung open, revealing its secrets. The bottom of the locker was filled with books of all shapes and sizes. History to science. There was a jacket hung from a hook, as well as an umbrella. Barbara poked around, looking for anything that might lead to the missing kids. This thing hasn't been cleaned out in a while. The math book was from 8th grade, but the science book was 12th. Talk about teenage nonsense. What's that thing? Bill pointed to a black bag stuffed down behind everything. Barbara drew it out, as if it may contain a cobra, or a bomb, or maybe a head, unattached to its rightful owner. What's in it? Manuel asked. It's a head. Barbara opened the bag so everybody could see a mannequin's head. The plastic head was minus any hair. The wig had fallen off some time long ago. It's a head, all right. The top shelf was a riot of makeup and pencils. Paper was shoved into the back, some half filled in, homework assignments. Then she found the necklace. It was old and creepy looking. The stone hung from the center was a black onyx, suspended from a silver chain. Manuel held out his hand. That's it. That's what I was feeling. He ran his fingers over the stone. The owner of this is probably looking for it. He closed his eyes. Yep, somebody borrowed this without asking. Barbara was looking at the unfinished homework page. Uh-oh. This wall locker belongs to Pam. The gathered bag members all looked at each other, and then they looked around the hall just in case Pam might be sneaking up on them. Madame Dingus cleared her throat. I never really did trust that girl. She checked her watch. I need to get going. I have a pressing engagement with somebody very important. Madame Dingus was getting her nails done. I think you should notify the authorities. And with that, she headed for the cafeteria. I wonder what it is about this piece of jewelry that feels so odd. Manuel ran the chain through his fingers. It's old. It must be 100 years or more. Pam was looking around, finding the experience of being here without any of her classmates just too weird. She tried using her extra sense, the one that allowed her to see ghosts and speak to them, but it only worked if there were ghosts around to speak to or look at. Now Pam used her time watching Sarah, who was having the time of her life, or keeping track of Mr. Wallace, who was wandering about trying to awaken dormant skills. I saw something, Sarah whispered in a shout. Pam looked in the same direction. What or who did you see? It was just like a shadow ducking around that corner, as Sarah managed to hide most of herself behind Pam's body. Well, let's have a look. Pam tried to move towards the corner. Sarah had such a tight grip on her waist as she could hardly breathe. Come on, let's go see what you saw. Pam dragged Sarah to the corner. Pam was not the bravest person, she knew, but it was broad daylight, and they were in a school where nothing weird had ever happened except maybe that one time, well, those several times, but still. The closer the pair got to the corner, the slower they managed to move. See, there's no one there. Sarah looked up at Pam. You're not even around the corner. Yes, well, I was giving you the chance to go first. You're bigger, and you have special powers. There's nothing there. As the two had been arguing about who would look, Mr. Wallace had walked over and was standing in the middle of the hallway, looking around the corner. Pam looked took a quick look, and then she relaxed a bit. See, nothing to worry about. She pulled Sarah around the corner. You might try opening your eyes. Sarah had spent a lot of time hanging out with Pam, so it was not unthinkable she would pick up some of Pam's idiosyncrasies. Sarah opened just one eye, so anything scary or nasty would enter her brain at half speed. I saw a shadow sneaking around the corner. She took several photos in case there was something there that was invisible. Bruce began to turn to see what other things he might pick up on or more than likely miss. There's something. He turned, looking around as if hearing something. I think there might be something in that wall locker, maybe. Pam looked at the lock. We'll probably never know unless you can get a student who owns the lock to come and open it for us. Barbara knows how to open locks, Sarah announced. She does? Pam had no idea. When did you discover that? When I was reshelving all those books for Mr. Techno, I found a book on locksmithing. Mr. Techno said it belonged to Miss what's her name? That had to be Barbara. Well, it doesn't really matter. We don't have a search warrant. Pam knew just enough about the law to get in trouble. Bruce was more concerned he was mistaken than about breaking the law. His psychic skills were a bit, well, very rusty. Why don't you ask her to come and have a look, just in case? He gave Pam his best winning smile. Pam drug her cell phone out and sent Barbara a text asking about her lock-picking skills. Barbara answered with a BRTTHR. Barbara looked at the lock and scratched her head. This one looks a bit better than that last piece of junk I just opened. She gave Pam a quick look. Shouldn't we get a warrant before you... Pam watched as Barbara worked her magic. Her magic needed some work. After several tries, she popped the lock open. We really shouldn't do this. Pam knew it was a violation of something. Maybe the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or the Bill of Wrongs, maybe. Barbara pulled the door open and looked inside. What's with you kids? Don't you ever throw anything away? The inside of the locker was stuffed so full there was no room for so much as a gum wrapper. Even the spider only had 4 legs. Bruce reached into the locker and grabbed a piece of paper at random. Pulling it out, he looked at the words written on it. It says, "You want," and the number 2, "come," with the number 2 again, "a party," with the number 2, and "a night." It also says, "We're having a get," the number 2, "gather," number 2, "a night to celebrate," a 2 with an S, day night, and Wednesday night, Thursday night, and weekend. Bruce gave Pam a look. Don't they teach spelling anymore? Whose locker is this? It might belong to one of the lingerers. Pam looked at the pile of trash slowly falling from the open door. These are the kids who linger around class without ever learning anything. Pam hoped she wasn't one of them. Here's a photograph of some guy. Barbara picked it up from the floor. It showed 2 kids trying to look more grown up than they actually were, or at any rate they were going to be, maybe. Pam looked at the 2 in the photo. Oh, that's Mindy and her boyfriend, Ralph. Are they missing? Pam thought about the last time she'd seen either of them. I saw Mindy just 2 days ago, and she did invite me to a party. Everybody looked at the paper Bruce was holding. This just might be important. Bruce looked around for any witnesses hiding nearby, then he slipped the paper into his pocket. We'll study it more in a less public place. Pam grabbed the mess at her feet and tried to get it all back into the locker. She felt just a bit unclean breaking into somebody's private property. I'm glad I don't have this kind of a problem. Barbara just stared at her. Pam saw the look of disbelief. I don't have anything in my locker except when I put my backpack in it. Really? Barbara looked down the hall in the direction of the other team. Which locker is yours? Over by the front door. It's number 333. It's only half evil. Why? Oh, just, wondering. Barbara was just wondering what she should do about that necklace. Barbara went back to her group, which wasn't really her group, but we already went over that. And Pam, well, Pam didn't have a group, which followed her down the hall and into the back section of the school. This was where things like auto shop and home ec were located, except they didn't really have an auto shop. Bruce stopped and looked under the staircase. There's something here. No, there was something here. The boxes from the shop had been neatly restacked, minus the motorcycle frame. Oh, that's where I found Rumpus Ganglia's motorcycle. Pam was impressed that Mr. Wallace was able to feel the location. All that showed anything had been here was an oil stain on the tile floor. And where do these stairs lead? Bruce looked up the dark steps leading to the next floor. I don't know. I've never been up there. Pam found it somewhat odd. There was a staircase leading upstairs in a one-story school. Let's go have a look. Sarah was already stepping up onto the first step. She got her foot onto number 2, as if waiting for Pam to lead the way. They were here to find answers to questions that hadn't been asked yet. But answers were in the schedule. Well, at least the pursuit of answers. Pam could find less reason to not go than to go, so up she went. Mr. Wallace grabbed the handrail and began pulling himself up. The stairs were narrower than seemed reasonable. The darkness at the top simply screamed unknown dangers lurked nearby. Pam looked over her shoulder to be sure help was nearby, and the event something with sharp teeth or a lot of them pounced on her from the landing. Sarah was just a few feet behind, looking less like backup plan than a diminutive Sprague. Mr. Wallace was just getting to the halfway point of the first set of stairs. A Sprague is a kid, a nipper, a young'un, a brat, or a child. Pam got to the landing and stuck her head around the corner. It was dark. Dark like the inside of a, well, it was a stairwell, so go figure. The steps led up to the second landing. This one had a door on it. The door looked as inviting as a shark's dentistry. The door was made sometime during the last century, all wood and brass with a glass panel mounted in the upper half. The glass was frosted, allowing just enough light to show so Pam knew where to place each foot. She stepped up onto the landing. The air felt cold and dusty. She could smell old books and burnt meat. Maybe someone has been performing human sacrifices up here, Pam said over her shoulder. Sarah was too far to hear. Both feet were now on the landing pointed towards the door. Pam could feel her knees shaking. She placed one hand on the knob. The metal was cold to her touch. I hope it's locked so I don't have to go in. What's that? The bore is shocking? Sarah had stopped on the landing and was looking up at Pam from around the corner, just one eye visible around the wall. Pam looked back at her minion. No, I said I think the door is... The knob turned and the door swung open. Oops. She looked into the room beyond. The room looked like a lounge. There were several tables with mismatching chairs. A counter ran the length of one wall with a microwave and a coffee pot. A refrigerator was holding down one corner. Oh, it's the teacher's lounge. She let go all the tension she'd been holding in for an enormous time. Sarah hurried up the rest of the steps to invade the domain of royalty. Every kid knew there was such a place, but few ever explored it. Wow, so this is where they go when they're not imparting their vast quantities of knowledge? Pam gave the tween an odd look. What? I want to become a writer, so I'm using expanded verbiage. The two began to explore. Mr. Wallace got to the door and leaned against the doorframe. He was too worn out to make it to the one chair. You guys let me know if you find anything. He felt like sitting on the floor. Pam looked at the tables and the chairs. They were worn and scuffed. There were recliners parked in two of the corners, an old ashtray set next to one. The cigarette butts were piled high, but they looked old. A no smoking sign hung from the wall right behind the ashtray. Sarah began opening cabinet doors. They got coffee and sugar and coffee cups, and here's a box of bullets. She checked the side. .357 Magnum. She looked at Pam. Do teachers carry guns in high school? No. Yes. Maybe. It depends on the class they're teaching. Now, Pam wasn't too sure if any of the staff were packing heat or not. Sarah opened the refrigerator. Why is there a cow's head in here? Science project? Pam thought about it for a second. That only makes sense if this was a classroom. She now wondered why the teachers would want a full head of a cow in with their lunch sacks. Let's get back downstairs. It's about time to call it quits. As Pam was turning back to the door, she saw a clipboard hanging from a nail on the wall. It drew her to it like a politician to a bribe. The first page had a list of names penciled on it. They were in no particular order, just names written one below the other. This is odd. Pam stared at the clipboard. Sarah stopped next to her. What's odd? She looked at the wall. You don't see this? Pam thumped the clipboard with her knuckle. It's a wall. Probably could use a scrubbing. Icky color of paint. Pam plucked the clipboard from the nail. Then this is something we should look into. She headed for the stairs, Sarah right behind her. Bruce looked at Pam. Whatever you found only looks like a shadow, kind of a cloud to me. He tried focusing on the item in Pam's hand. The Bag folks all gathered around the table where George was sound asleep. We found a magic clipboard, Sarah announced to the gathered crew. Barbara aimed one of her many electronic gadgets at whatever Pam looked to be holding. I'm getting a slight jump in energy when I scan past your hand. Sarah clicked several photos of what nobody could see. We should get out of here. Pam thought about poking George in the arm to wake him. George sensed the unpoked finger and awoke. Should we get started then? He looked at the Bag members gathered around him. I guess we finished then? He tried to get his feet under him, but one leg was still snoozing, so he just stood there leaning on the tabletop. So, did we find any goodies? Come on, we're heading to the office. Barbara pulled George towards the door. They met up in the classroom used by Calinda Jefferson to review their evidence. Being in the storage building out behind the Bag office, the bizarre effects of the house didn't quite reach this far back. Eddie had been parking his motorcycle out here for just this reason. The yard goat watched as the investigators unloaded their investigation toys and tromped into the classroom. Bruce plopped down in a chair as if gravity were dragging him to the center of the earth, which it is. His left leg hurt and his left arm was numb. I've abused the left side of my body way too much. He pulled a strange note from his pocket. This writing means something, but I'll be darned if I can decipher what. Pam looked out at the assembled bag team, along with a man holding a top hat and a woman with a parasol and a floor-length dress. Can I help y'all? We are present for your class regarding the proper use of what is being referred to as modern technology. Oh, it's Saturday. The class is Monday through Friday. Pam spoke to the back of the room. Oh dear, I guess we should depart then and bid you a fond farewell. We shall return when the class is available. The man stood, held out his hand to assist the woman, and then the pair made their way to the door. Sarah tried to see who Pam was speaking to. She grabbed her camera and snapped off several photos, hoping to catch the ghostly couple in at least one. Pam set the clipboard down on one of the tables. Manuel and Bruce both caught the sound of something hitting the wooden top, but they saw nothing. There seems to be a list of names. Hector Megrabusco. Pam read the first name. Then there's a Mary Milton Hamilton. As she read off the names on the clipboard, Sarah diligently wrote them out in her notebook. There were 25 names on the list, and a note stating all of these people are missing. All of those names are on the ghost clipboard you found at the school? Do you suppose they're the kids missing from 20 years ago? Barbara was impressed by what they had found in their search. Pam looked at the list of names. We should check them against the file from Mr. Hansenson's office. The file was in her office over in the main building. I'll be right back. Pam left the bag crew to discuss just about anything coming to mind while she ducked out and went to get the file. As Pam walked across the yard, the poultrygeist came clucking along, pecking at ghost worms. Several of them stopped and gave Pam a thumbs up, which, considering the lack of thumbs, looked pretty impressive. The kitchen door was seldom locked, but at least it did close, unlike the front door, which just swung back and forth with the wind. The kitchen hadn't seen any action in the form of culinary production in several decades. Carol Munchausen usually used the kitchen as her office, since most of her clientele didn't handle stairs too well. Carol was the pet psychic and had a bunch of horses as well as donkeys and pigs and just about every animal known to man that lived on this side of the planet and had access to the mansion and came seeking her psychic contact. The hallway led from the kitchen to the back of Hildy's desk, where Pam had started her career working for her uncle just 3 months ago. As she passed Hildy's desk, Pam spotted Sharma sweeping the stairs from the second floor down. You don't have to do that. We have a crew that come in on the weekends to clean. You had a crew that came in on the weekends and goofed off all day. Dan ran them off, so now I'm taking care of things. Pam didn't really want to know how Dan had done the deed. But you don't have to work here. You should be relaxing and having fun. It's the least we can do. You're helping us out so much. See the bag company and the bag Here We Go Again if you're wondering what's going on here. Pam couldn't help but look around for any eavesdroppers. Have you or Dan found out anything about you-know-who? Pam pointed one finger covertly at Hildy's desk. Sharma looked around a bit as well. Every time we think we have an answer, it turns out one or the other has slipped away or transformed into the other. Pam wondered just how were a pair of ghosts able to clean. This led to her wondering how Sharma and Dan were able to sort papers. Gotta go. We're working on that missing kids case. Pam ran to her office. As she went, she wondered about ghosts. She got back to the classroom and began comparing names from the file to the names from the clipboard. Here we go, one Mary Milton Hamilton listed as missing 20 years ago. She checked several more names to be sure. Barbara asked, "Do you have a list of the missing kids from this week?" Pam thought about it. She knew some of her classmates, but not very well. She tried racking her brain to come up with names for the missing. Sarah added the names to the new page in her notebook. Once Pam could think no more, Sarah added up her list. We have 32 names here. Bruce held up the paper he'd found. This paper is weird, and not just what's written on it. It has a feel to it. The paper was crumpled from before he'd grabbed it. Somebody had crumpled the page several times and folded and unfolded it as well. Sarah clicked a bunch of pictures of the page. We need to figure out where these kids are going and what's happening to them. Pam looked at her watch. But first, we have to go. My mom will be pissed if I'm late for dinner again. She got Sarah and headed for her truck. Paula was just about to call Pam when the two girls came scurrying in the front door and made their presence known. Chapter 9. The next Sunday. Sunday was supposed to be time to do things as a family. First was church, which Pam found just a bit boring because the sermon was on demons, and Pam had already had her fill of demons. After Demon Bob had destroyed most of room 3D after consuming part of the devil's trap, and then there was Demon Waldo who wanted to consume her and Sarah. Well, hearing about demons just wasn't scary. Next came the big family get-together, along with the Bellums and a few friends from around the neighborhood who hadn't had to move out waiting for their homes to be repaired. A very late lunch or really early dinner. Pam was dreading the rice and beans about to be served by Paula. Seeing as Pam had helped finance the reconstruction of the bogus home, Al was grilling some real food on what was left of the backyard kitchen. As food was being set on plates and people gathered around, Sandy came bopping down the stairs, dressed for other things. I'm heading over to a real party. I'll be back later. Miss Bellum looked just enough upset. And you're just now telling me about this? I just now got the call. Seems a bunch of guys from school are getting together to celebrate the end of the weekend. Miss Bellum wanted to know who all was going to be there and who was in charge and where they were going and, well, all the things a mother should ask before allowing her teenage daughter to go out. Sandy had prepared a list of answers for any and all of her mom's questions. Pam felt just the tiniest bit left out, not receiving any such phone call. Then she saw the food her dad had prepared, and the thought of partying slipped silently away, replaced by the idea of real food for a change. Man, it would be cool to go to a gathering where the oldest attendee wasn't a fossil. Oh, grow up. You know these kinds of things can only lead to death and destruction. You're doing the right thing by not going. Besides, you have school tomorrow. Pam found a place to sit on a stone wall of the flower box. The wood of the picnic table had been fed to the fire during the summer blizzard. Paula drug a few chairs out from the garage. Just about anything made of wood had to be replaced, and soon. The food was mostly gone. Paula had squirreled away just enough for Pam's lunch tomorrow and maybe Tuesday and Wednesday as well. Nothing like a nice cold hot dog to round out the lunch hour. The adults had settled down to discuss whatever it was that adults found fascinating. Pam lingered on the edge of the crowd until she discovered the subject was as fascinating as any fertilizer convention. She leaped inside to watch some TV. Oh, cool. Oak Island. I hope they get to the bottom of this time. Pam and Sarah settled in for the evening. As adults vanished out the door and what was left of the food vanished into stomachs or the fridge, Pam woke up just enough to find her way upstairs to the guest room and get down to the real business of sleeping. She hadn't noticed Sandy was not home yet. Chapter Dead. Mondays. Pam sat in her desk waiting for the bell to announce class was about to start. She looked at all the empty seats, wondering if this was some new flu virus or were these kids among the missing. Mrs. Grampus went down the roll call, finding more missing than present. I just hope these kids realize they'll have to make up all the class time they missed. She sent off the list of absentees. Miss Bogus, would you see me immediately after class today? Pam felt all eyes turn her way. So, has your uncle come up with any kind of a conclusion as to what's going on with all these missing students? Pam wondered if she should mention what they'd found Saturday. Do you go to school here? She asked her teacher. No, I grew up in Odessa. I wanted to change of pace, so I moved to this end of the state. Talk about different. Odessa was out west where trees were few and far between. We think there just might be a connection between what's going on here and something that happened 20 years ago. Pam didn't want to go into too many details, seeing as they did acquire their evidence through just slightly unconstitutional means. They had seriously bruised the 4th and 14th Amendment. Do you guys, that is, you school teachers, keep a clipboard behind the door in the teacher's lounge? Teacher's lounge? Well, there's no teacher's lounge here. We have to hang out in the counselor's office since we don't have a counselor anymore. Pam did a quick recovery. We found a list of missing students from 1990, and we're looking into the similarities between then and now. The bell rang. Once more, Pam had been supplied with an excuse as to why she was moving about the hallway when she should be in class. Once more, she ran into all the staff not involved in teaching. World history was sad-looking. Only 10 students had shown up for class. Pam dropped into her seat and tried to get caught up on the day's subject. Then she noticed Sandy wasn't in her desk. She usually sat right next to Pam, but the desk was empty. It was all Pam could do not to pull her cell phone out and call home. She desperately wanted to know if Sandy was homesick or hopefully not amongst the missing. Not that Sandy and her ever exchanged more than a few words, but she was Sarah's sister and therefore kind of like family. Like a distant cousin you saw at family reunions and never got to know. She's vanished and she'll never be seen again. This will lead Miss Bellum to drinking heavily. Her mom will be devastated. Sarah will probably wind up being sent away to an orphanage. Pam wanted to yell at the voices to shut up, but they were in her head. She'd come to the conclusion the voices only heard her if she spoke out loud. Be quiet, I'm trying to listen, Pam said just loud enough so the voices could hear her. Aren't you worried about your friend? She's not really my friend, now shut up, Pam tried to yell without raising her voice. Tomorrow, and there will be no excuses this time, Miss Goblin said, just as the bell announced the end of the second period. Pam nearly ran from the classroom. She got her cell phone out and looked around to see if anybody was watching. No one seemed interested in anything Pam was doing. She hit the button for home and listened to the sound of the ringing phone. She only had 5 minutes to get to her next class, so Pam began to walk in that direction while still listening to the phone ring. When no one had answered after way too many rings, Pam hung up and tried her mom's cell phone. The tower had fallen down, but there was a temporary cell tower set up on the roof of the corner mart. It was about as reliable as any 2-cent politician, but sometimes it would connect. Pam listened to the ringing at the other end. Hello, are you okay? Paula asked as soon as she answered. Pam never called while in school. Yes, I'm fine. I called to ask if maybe... How to ask? Pam didn't want to get Sandy in trouble if, say, she had not gone to school but was not amongst the missing. How would Sandy feel knowing that Pam had dropped a dime on her? Is Sandy homesick? Maybe, kind of, sort of. Pam prayed Sandy was there and not there at the same time. I don't know. I'm looking at furniture. Your father said to pick something out, so I'm having a look at the nearby antique shops. Nearly antique was Paula's way of saying used furniture. Her and Al had decided to get completely out of debt after attending a Dave Ramsey seminar. After paying off all their credit cards and getting rid of Paula's school debt, Paula had gone to school majoring in animal psychology, only to find out there were few jobs open for pet psychiatrists. They had just started building some savings when the snowstorm hit. Paula and Al didn't consider themselves cheap. Frugal was the word of choice. Pam was just happy to not be eating rice and beans every night. It's just that I didn't see her in class, and what with all the missings going on, and I'm worried. I'll tell you what, I'm about done here. I'll nip on to the home and have a look. I'll send you a text of what I find. Paula hoped Pam was just being paranoid. Thanks, Mom. Better get going. Pam walked into home ec. Once she had taken her seat, she realized she was supposed to be in English class. She bolted for the door. Pam pulled a used bread wrapper from her backpack and fished out the cold hot dog from deep inside. Her cell phone was next. It showed she had several text messages and a leak from her hot dog. There was mustard on her phone. Being the girl she was, Pam began licking the yellow stuff from her cell phone just as a bunch of fellow students came walking out the door. The silence spoke volumes. She just tried to act natural as the gaggle of girls wandered by, looking at her as if she were acting in a far more unusual manner than she was known to act. A few giggled. Pam checked her phone. The mustard was mostly cleaned up, and the traces of saliva was hers, so she got down to business. There was a text from Sharma, and one from some prince in Ethiopia. Then she spotted the text from her mother. Good news, I hope. Pam opened the file. Sandy is not at home. There was a sad face. No idea where she might be. There was a clock and a black cloud. This was not what Pam wanted to hear or read. She also was curious as to what those symbols meant and how her mom got them to show up in the text. She picked the onion from her phone and stuck it back in her hot dog. Pam got to home ec just as the bell was ringing. She saw the empty chairs all around the room, including Mrs. Sandtiger. There was a substitute teacher today. My name is Mrs. Ray, and Miss Sandtiger is not in today. Anyway, today we'll be making a delicious cake using ingredients found in any kitchen. The students got busy grabbing contents from the shelves. Pam got a large bin filled with slightly dark-colored flour, whole wheat, maybe, and got to work. She mixed in some baking powder and some sugar, and not sure how much she dumped in half the bag. There was no eggs because the cafeteria had taken them, so Pam had to use a banana from the bottom of her book bag. It was already squishy, so she just dropped it in. Then she was careful to pull out as much peel as she could find. Everything was going great. Pam stood out on the sidewalk watching as the fire department rolled up their hoses. There was now a nice big hole in the wall where home ec class used to be. Her shirt was slightly scorched all down the front, and both sleeves of her shirt were just memories. Well, all but the cuffs, which were still wrapped around each wrist. What had been white this morning was now gray and black. It was a good thing she was wearing an apron. It had saved her from losing her dress to the flames. Also, fortunately, Pam had been using a scarf to keep most of her hair out of the mixture, so she still had what little hair had grown back since her run-in with that volcano. Miss Ray kept looking at Pam as if she just might have had something to do with that explosion. The entire school had been evacuated from class, not knowing what had blown up, and the smoke cleared and the damage was assessed. It became obvious that one of the school's ovens had gone into orbit, somewhere out amongst the satellites. There was a smoky crater where the appliance had been sitting. Mr. Hammerhead came stalking over, moving like a shark in the pursuit of his next meal. Miss Bogus, could I have a moment of your time in my office? Immediately. He turned and began meandering back towards his den. Pam was about to ask Miss Ray, but was immediately given orders to follow the principal. There was all that was portrayed to her was one finger pointing in the direction of the front office. I'll just run along and see what the principal wants. Pam hoped it wasn't anything to do with blowing up the home ec room. She was 90%, well, maybe 75% certain that she hadn't done anything. Well, she was 50% certain she wasn't to blame. So what have you found out? Mr. Hammerhead kept pacing back and forth, occasionally glancing out the window. He looked like a tiger trapped in a cage at the zoo. Well, we found out there were similar disappearances back 20 years ago. Pam pulled the list of names from her book bag. We think they might be related. Mr. Hammerhead looked at Pam, holding her hand out in front of her face as if she were reading from a script. She looked as if she had lost her grasp on reality. Oh, yes, those kids. He thought about back when he was a college student studying to become a teacher who was destined to become a principal. Seeing as there were so few, as in 2, high schools in town, word spread quickly as to what was going on at the one. All his fellow teachers' students had prayed they would not get sent to the school with the bad reputation, and now here he was, the man in charge, as it were. According to our sources, none of the missing kids ever returned. Pam carefully slid the page back into her book bag. Mr. Hammerhead paced around his desk, trying to come to a decision he'd already made. I think this whole situation is getting out of hand. I think it's time for a field trip. Pam just sat there staring at the principal. Field trip? As in my class? No, not your class, just you. See, what with your class time interfering with your investigation time, and the school needs time to repair some of the damages. He glanced out the window as a fire truck went by. I think you should take a special course of study under the fine tutelage of a dear friend of mine, Angie Dingwhopper. The blank look on Pam's face got him to worrying. You know Angie. Angela Dingwhopper? Oh, that's right. She calls herself Madame Dingus now. Pam had never heard Madame Dingus's first name, nor that she had changed her last name. I'm being assigned to one of my uncle's employees? No one actually worked for her uncle except maybe the receptionist and the maintenance man, but no other descriptive ever seemed to work. Yes, she'll make a fine instructor, I think. Well, it's for the best. I called her, and she said she'd be delighted to take you under her wing. The sooner you figure out where all the students are and get them back to class, the happier everyone will be, except maybe the teachers. Mr. Hammerhead pulled a form from his desk drawer. Here, keep this on you in case you run into any of the truancy police. It says you're on a special class assignment, and whatever you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing. Pam took the form and walked out to her wall locker. The only thing in it was a TV remote, and that didn't seem to control anything, seeing as there was no TV around. It had shown up when she was a freshman. She felt just a bit like she was being expelled or punished for some wrongdoing that she didn't do. Madame Dingus? How could he? It wasn't as if her and Madame Dingus were enemies. It was just that Madame Dingus was such a hard woman to work with. As Pam took the long walk, it was just out the door and across the street, She felt the world had somehow conspired to get her into trouble. Who could have expected the stove to blow up? She was now pretty 20% certain she wasn't to blame for the catastrophe. Pam drove over to the bag office to begin her field trip assignment. And I will break here, and hopefully I'll have the next show ready in a short time. If you've enjoyed the show, let your friends know what they're missing. And if you didn't enjoy the show, why are you listening to me? Until next week, this is Chris James for Storytime.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?